USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. An in-depth look at this week's top college hockey matchup and a preview of the other big games.
Welcome to the Game of the Week podcast for Thursday, January 14th, 2021. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. It's hard picking a game of the week when you don't even know for sure what games are going to be played, but it looks like a good series this weekend with UMass home and home, and their opponent is Boston University.
And joining us this week on Game of the Week podcast, previewing their series against Boston University, it is UMass head coach Greg Carvel. And Greg, first off, welcome, but crazy this week. I mean, you started the week with thinking you're in a 3-game week. A Wednesday game against Providence gets canceled. Then you thought you were playing Boston College on Friday and Saturday. Now it's Boston University. It's crazy these times. We understand that. But as a coach, how crazy is it just to try to manage what you have going on here?
It's been crazy all year. It seems to get more crazier and crazier. Like you said, BC, we thought we were playing UNH this weekend, and then it shifted to BU, the Providence game. So we thought we were playing 3 games in 4 nights. Now we're hoping we can play 2 games on the weekend. And that's just the way it is. And everybody's adjusted to it. Now when you go in and tell the team, hey, we're not playing tomorrow, you don't get to moan and groan. You're just kind of like, okay, well, we know things will change. Maybe somebody else will fill in there shortly. So it's tough. We're all dealing with it. I think the league and schools are doing the best they can. And we appreciate the efforts that when one door closes, our administration's working really hard to open another. So we all, players and coaches, recognize that. And as long as they're doing that, all we can do is be ready when they call.
It has been a success thus far, I'd say, getting on the ice for your program, to take Wednesday's game away. But I look at the fact you've played 13 games at this point, including 7 straight wins. I should mention that right off the top. But is there the right words don't come out sometimes with this, but has it been a good onus on the players that they've been able to stay healthy and stay out of COVID jail, if you will, and still get these games played?
Yeah, I think we have an advantage. We're in Western Mass. It's not too bad out here. Things are spread out. Students were not on campus in the fall for the most part, and our guys are they're housed pretty separately. So they go from their dorms to the rink or their apartments off campus. And we've been fortunate in our setup. I'm sure we've been lucky as well. We haven't had a player test positive. And in the long run, I don't know if that's going to be good or bad. The teams that have had a lot of positives early, maybe that's an advantage late, but it's been an advantage to us right now. We've made pretty much the most of that advantage. And in a lot of games we've gone in, I feel like better conditioned, better prepared than our opponents just because they've had to be on pause or haven't had as much time to get their games in order. And that's where we went into this whole pandemic asking our guys to sacrifice and make sure they stay safe. And we want to be the best team at dealing with the pandemic. And, so far so good, but things change so quickly that it may not be the case next week.
Yeah, it's always knocking on wood. Let's break down your season a little bit to this point. You started out 2-3-1, and the final loss in that was a road loss at Merrimack. And I know I talked to you recently after one of your games and listened to you say that you felt like that was kind of a turning point. And since then, 7 straight wins. What has changed throughout the season, and what has been kind of the trigger behind the success over these last, really almost a full month without a loss?
Yeah, we got to the Merrimack game. Again, it was their first games. They were flying high. They played pretty well. We squeaked by a win on Friday night, and then we went up there the next day, and we didn't show up. And that was pretty unique situation. Our kids have done a great job the last couple of years of always showing up, playing hard, and we just had nothing in the tank. And it just hit me that they'd hit the wall. We'd been practicing for a number of months. 6 games in, and we hit the wall. And so we had to adjust. We had a lot of talks. We actually had the next weekend off, which helped. We've just adjusted how we practice, how we do things, and realized that we're past the point of, having to be working on technical things. We have to focus on making sure the guy's energy is at a good level. And we found that, the main part of the pandemic is isolation and separation. And that's not healthy. And we felt that was creeping into our team. So we adjusted and we're trying to do way more things where we're connecting with our players. We're around them more while, at the same time abiding to all the restrictions. But I felt like there was a distance that had been created between maybe the staff and the players, and they were worn out. And that was a bad combination. And we've adjusted, and we feel like, again, that we've made it an advantage that we're in mid-season shape because we haven't had to close down. But we got to keep them in mid-season shape by keeping their batteries full. And as I said, that comes in many different forms.
When you approached that and you were able to recognize the fact that your team was a little bit burned out, as a coach, what can you do specifically? I mean, especially the on the ice stuff. Do you cut back your practices? Do you try to keep things brief? Do you maybe spend more time in the weight room showing more film, something like that? How do you balance things now?
I think you have to give them time away from the rink. I think they have to have days where they don't put their equipment on. I think practices have to be invigorating. They have to be, you have to have competition. The kids, they're always ready to compete. And so we started having more competition drills as opposed to technical drills. And again, the off-ice stuff, just communication was vital to hear from the players where they were at. All these kids are such good kids. They'll try to do anything for you, but at some point, you gotta be picking up on the cues that they're sending out. And I thought we did a good job with that. And it's unfortunate we have not played now in over a week because I'd like to get going again because, as I said, we've won 7 in a row. And I think a lot of that is just because we're in mid-season form and we want to stay on top of that.
We're talking to UMass head coach Greg Carvel. A couple of seasons ago, your team was the national runner-up. People who had not been paying attention to UMass had their eyes opened. And while it doesn't hurt having a Hobie Baker winner and Cale Makar on the team, there was a whole lot more depth to that team and continues to be for UMass. Now that you've elevated the program to this high level and a national level, what does it take to stay at that level or continue to find ways to improve?
Well, that is the challenge. It's easy to go from the bottom to near the top. It's harder to sustain that. We've been, we have an identity as a team, and we bring in kids that we think are going to play that identity. It's no different than other teams in our league that have had sustained success, like Lowell and Providence. I think it's really just finding the right kids to fit your culture, hold them to really high standards, and develop them in a lot of different ways. We're very proud of the fact that our hockey teams had the highest GPA of any athletic team on campus for 3 years in a row. That's just an example of the character development that we think is as important as the on-ice development. And then the on-ice development, you talk about that team that went to the national championship game. There's four kids that year were sophomores, are all now playing in the NHL. And Cale Makar was an easy, he was going to play in the NHL. Those other 3 kids, there's no guarantee, but we've been able to find good kids who have good talent and make them better players. We've got a nice streak here of having kids drafted after their freshman year, that were eligible for the draft the prior year. But every year we have 1 or 2 kids who, after their freshman year, are getting drafted. And to me, that's a real good sign that of the quick development that we're able to bring to these kids. And that's a really important part of success. I think the really good programs, your kids don't make it to senior year. And that's where Cale Makar, Mario Ferraro, John Leonard, Mitch Chafee, they'd all be seniors this year, but none of them are here. And that's a good thing. That means we're doing things right. We're getting them ready and moving them on, and they'll all graduate, which is the other part of it. This isn't in no way are we want to be a hockey factory. We want to do the entire student athlete development. and I think we're doing a good job.
With the limitations in travel and also limitations for campus visits, how's your staff adjusted to kind of a new way to go about recruiting?
Well, I think it was trending this way anyways, where everything's available online. Everything is done through advisors. A lot of it is. So it's almost status quo. I think our staff, or my assistants, go on the road more so just to build relationships as opposed to evaluate talent. So I don't think it's changed too much. It has been a nice change where the reputation of the program is gotten to a point where we have a lot of interest, and good players are coming to us either on their own or through their advisors. And, we got to continue to select the kid that fits our program well. And, I tell you, it's a nice change because 5 years ago we scratching and crawling to get kids to come visit on campus, and things are quite different now.
Greg, you mentioned the fact that your team has had some success getting games played. Your opponent this weekend, Boston University, just 2 games played. They came last weekend. If you look at those 2 games, which I know you have, kind of uncharacteristic games with a lot of goals scored against Providence, both sides. Can you learn anything out of watching tape about BU, or do you just kind of have to go out each weekend and more just focus on what you do well, and hopefully that takes care of itself?
Yeah, that's been the big adjustment, is more concerned about your own team than in the past. We do a fair bit with the pre-scout of our opponents, and of course we watch both of those games. But I find myself now giving less to our players to worry about as far as our opponent, and just making them much more, make sure we're doing what we do really well. And so that has been a change this year, because, I spend a lot of time watching Providence play, and then we don't play them. So you get to the point where you start wondering if it's even worth watching a little bit. But coaching now 5 years in the league, you know the tendencies of the other coaches, and they do of our program as well. So pre-scouts become a much different animal now, and I appreciate that. I think our players do too, and I think they go into a game more worried about doing the things they know they do as opposed to what the opponent does. I think it's easier for them to play as well.
And it will be nationally ranked UMass. They will take on Boston University 2 games this weekend as of right now scheduled. And Greg Carvel, always a pleasure catching up with you. Thanks so much for your time. And hopefully we'll be able to do it again and talk a little bit more later in the season. My pleasure, Jim. Good talking to you.
We'll talk about this matchup and others on the Game of the Week podcast from USCHO.
This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from US College Hockey Online.
Back with the Game of the Week podcast. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Jim, Boston University and UMass. BU is still sort of an unknown after 2 lopsided games, one in their favor and one against. While with 13 games under their belt, nobody can overlook UMass.
Yeah, I don't know how to figure out Boston University. I don't think it's possible after 2 games to really do so. The one thing that kind of sticks out and maybe is a concern is the number of goals that they gave up last weekend against Providence. And I know that Providence has some power in their offense, but that Albie O'Connell wants to limit that. As for UMass, yes, you heard Greg Carvel say he wants to just get back out and play because his team was rolling 7 in a row. They're playing very well. They haven't played in a little over a week and a half going into this series. And we're hearing that there might have to be some alterations to the dates and times on this series, but it does feel like this one will get played. But it should be a good series of hockey and a good test for both of these clubs. We'll know a lot more about Boston University, I think, by the end of this weekend.
Well, the travel's pretty short in the other premier matchup in Hockey East this weekend, just about 3 miles or so, I guess. Number 14, Northeastern, and number 3, Boston College.
Should be a very good tilt. And Northeastern will be without their head coach, who has close contact. Thus, he missed Wednesday's game. It didn't seem to matter. His Huskies still rolled, but then he's going to miss this series as well. So that is maybe, I don't know that matters too much. He's got a great staff. Jerry Keefe is one of the best assistants in the country. So I think that won't have too much of an impact on him, but Devin Levy, the goaltender, who was the excellent goaltender, that backbone candidate to the silver medal at World Juniors, it is announced that he was out on Wednesday. I don't know what his status is for the weekend, but if he's not in net, that is a bit of a question mark. And then BC, they're missing Alex Newhook right now, and I believe Logan Husko as well. We don't know what their timelines are. So an interesting series, two really good teams, two of the better teams, I think, in Hockey East, but the injuries kind of put a lot of question marks around these two programs.
Spencer Knight is back at BC, and so unfortunately we may not see that rematch of the gold medal game.
That is true, and that is one of those things that I think everybody was looking forward to, was when BC and Northeastern finally got on the ice together. You can see those two goaltenders go head-to-head, but we don't know. I don't know what Levi's status is right now, but if he's available, you know that he will play, and it will be great to see those two go at it again.
In the Big Ten, number 1 Minnesota, one loss suffered last weekend at Wisconsin. They've got Notre Dame coming in for a pair.
Good series here. I feel like Notre Dame, maybe they haven't played their best hockey yet. I think that they have a little bit more in them than they have showed to this point. And it's almost a theme in the Big Ten. There needs to be a little bit more consistency among a lot of these teams. The most consistent team, though, Minnesota. They did fall last week to Wisconsin, split that series there. But I think I talked about last week on one of the podcasts with you. I mentioned on Big Ten Network that sometimes it's good to have a bump in the road. You don't learn a lot about yourself by always winning. You lose games, you start to understand a little bit about where some of your weaknesses are. And I think that Bob Moskow, he wants to win every game, but that loss last weekend to Wisconsin, probably a good thing for his club. Doesn't want two more this weekend to Notre Dame. We know that, but it should be a good tilt there.
The other ranked team in play in the Big Ten, number 9 Michigan, has Ohio State coming in. When we turn to the ECAC, a longtime rivalry, just a few miles down the road also, St. Lawrence and number 13 Clarkson.
And these guys usually get a couple of times to play each other. Sometimes I think they were in recent years scheduling a third, maybe even a fourth non-league game against one another. But this strange year that is, these teams will actually face each other a total of 6 times. And if there is no rivalry, thoughts go, maybe in a 2-game series, and we know that there always are, 6 times in the season, these two teams will have some, what's the word? I don't want to say hate, but maybe some disdain for one another. and it should show on the ice. This will be a physical series, always is. Don't be surprised if you finish one of these games with 15 plus minutes and penalties. That's just who these two teams are.
And St. Lawrence head coach Brent Brekke really knows Clarkson well. In his second season behind the Saints bench, he came there from Clarkson as an assistant. Let's also look at the other matchup, Quinnipiac and Colgate. That should be good as well. When we turn to the NCHC, a very light schedule. Number 4 St. Cloud is at Western Michigan, but then delayed a little bit later in the weekend, Sunday and Monday, rescheduled. It is number 2 North Dakota at number 18 Denver.
Yeah, the success that the NCHC had in their pod and getting most of their games played, Colorado College lost a couple, and because of that, some teams only got 9 games played instead of the 10 that they were supposed to. But since then, it's been, you see why they went to a bubble, because you need it in these COVID days. And since then, schedules have been inconsistent. Games have been canceled. We have Omaha has not played a game, I don't believe, since the pod ended. So there's challenges ahead, and you're going to see these schedules now impacting the NCHC, just like it has every other league in the country. There'll be cancellations, there'll be changes, there'll be modifications to the dates that games are played.
Speaking of modifications, Monday and Tuesday, number 10, Omaha at Colorado College. It has been a tough stretch after the pod was in Omaha. The Mavericks have not been able to play until coming up on Monday and Tuesday. Let's turn now to the WCHA. This looks like a pretty good matchup. Number 5, Minnesota State, and number 19, Lake Superior.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out exactly how good Lake Superior is. I mean, they've played very well. I believe they're 6-3-1 right now. They're coming off a weekend sweep. So the things are rolling right there, and they're going to play a Minnesota State team that's had a little bit of rest. They had their series last weekend did not get played. So they are a weekend off, and it'll be 2 weeks since they've played. They'll probably be pretty hungry to get back on the ice. But these are two talented teams. These are two teams that at the end of the year, I think will be right there at the top of the WCHA standing. So good series here. You're going to see the skill that we know that Minnesota State has, great goaltending. It'll be tested by a good Lake State team.
In Atlantic hockey, just about all the league play has been postponed. The only thing on the schedule within the league is number 17, Robert Morris at Mercyhurst, scheduled for next Tuesday. Robert Morris has been really on a tear with 6 in a row. But a non-conference game of note for an Atlantic hockey team. Brett Riley will take his upstart Long Island University Sharks in for 2 games at Uncle Brian Riley's Army West Point.
We talked a little bit earlier this week about, Army and the history of Riley's and the fact that, there could be more Riley's behind the bench if Brett decides to ever replace his uncle at Army West Point. But I think that Brian Riley, he's obviously coached against his sons who went to Mercyhurst, and now he gets to coach against a nephew who will be the opposing coach. I think he kind of relishes these moments. That he understands the legacy that the Riley family has in American hockey and in college hockey. So I think he really relishes these moments, and to be able to do it for the first time against your nephew, that's going to be something pretty special as well.
Well, we're recording this early Thursday afternoon. Schedules are subject to change, but hope you get to catch some hockey. There's a ton of it streaming and on networks. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Game of the Week podcast, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.